The pickaxe struck stone for the 1,000th time that morning, and Zachary Ramsey wondered if he would die alone in these God-forsaken mountains with nothing but fool's hope and dried jerky to show for 3 years of backbreaking labor. He wiped the sweat from his brow, the Arizona sun beating down mercilessly on the entrance to his mine shaft just outside Wilcox, and raised the pick again. This time, when metal met rock, something glinted in the dim light filtering through the dust. Zachary's heart hammered as he dropped to his knees, his calloused fingers trembling as they traced the vein of gold running through the granite like a river of sunshine frozen in time. He had found it. After all these years, all the loneliness, all the nights sleeping on hard ground with only the coyotes for company, he had actually struck gold. The vein was thick, probably extending deep into the mountain, worth more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He should have been shouting with joy, dancing, celebrating. Instead, Zachary sat back on his heels and felt the crushing weight of solitude settle over his shoulders like a leaden blanket. There was no one to tell, no one who cared whether he lived or died, struck gold or struck out. His parents were long dead, buried back in Missouri before he headed west in 1878. His brother had died of cholera on the wagon train. The few friends he had made over the years had moved on to other prospects, other dreams. Zachary Ramsey was 32 years old, wealthy beyond measure, and more alone than any man had a right to be. He spent the rest of that day in June of 1881 carefully extracting samples, his mind working through the logistics. He would need to file a proper claim, hire workers, set up operations. The thought exhausted him. What was the point of wealth if you had no one to share it with? No wife waiting at home, no children to provide for, no family to lift from poverty. As twilight painted the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Zachary made his way back to his small cabin nestled in a canyon about 2 miles from the mine. It was not much, just 4 walls and a roof, but he had built it himself from timber hauled down from the mountains. Inside, everything was neat and orderly because there was no one to make a mess, no one to leave their things lying about, no one to fill the silence with conversation and laughter. He lit a lamp and sat at his rough-hewn table, staring at the gold samples glinting in the flickering light. Tomorrow he would ride into Wilcox and register his claim. Tomorrow he would become a rich man on paper. Tomorrow would be just as lonely as today. Sleep came fitfully that night, and Zachary woke before dawn with a strange sense of foreboding he could not shake. He ate a cold breakfast of hardtack and coffee, then saddled his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper. The ride into Wilcox usually took about an hour, following the old trail that wound through the canyons and across the dry creek beds that only ran during the summer monsoons. He had made it about halfway when he heard it, a sound that did not belong in the morning stillness. A woman's voice, calling out weakly for help. Zachary reined Copper to a stop and listened. There it was again, coming from somewhere off the trail to the east. Every instinct told him to be cautious. This was rough country, and ambushes were not unheard of. Bandits sometimes used tricks to lure travelers off the main paths, but the voice sounded genuinely distressed, thin with pain or exhaustion. He guided Copper carefully through the scrub brush and rocks, following the sound. What he found made his breath catch in his throat. A woman lay beside an overturned wagon, her dress torn and dusty, her dark blonde hair tangled with bits of brush and debris. The wagon had clearly lost a wheel and tumbled down a small ravine. A horse, still in its traces, stood nearby with its head hanging low. The woman's eyes were closed, her face pale despite the sun's damage to her skin. Zachary dismounted quickly and knelt beside her. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of sage after rain, a pale green-gray that seemed to look right through him. "Water," she whispered. He grabbed his canteen and carefully lifted her head, letting her drink in small sips. She was young, probably in her mid-20s, with delicate features made gaunt by what looked like several days of exposure. As she drank, he assessed her injuries. One ankle was clearly swollen, possibly broken. Her hands were scraped raw, and there was a nasty gash on her forehead crusted with dried blood. "How long have you been here?" Zachary asked gently. "3 days," she managed, her voice growing stronger with the water. "Maybe 4, I lost count. The wheel came off and the wagon went over. I tried to walk, but my ankle gave out. I crawled back to the wagon for shade, but my supplies were scattered. I found a little water, but it ran out yesterday morning." "What are you doing out here alone?" A flicker of something, pain or perhaps shame, crossed her face. "I was leaving Tucson, heading to Wilcox. I heard there might be work there, teaching or keeping house. I could not afford a stage ticket, so I bought the wagon and horse cheap and set out alone. Foolish, I know." Zachary shook his head. "Brave, more like. Let me get you out of this sun and see to your injuries." As carefully as he could, he lifted her. She was light, too light, and he could feel her bones through the thin fabric of her dress. He carried her to a shaded spot beneath an overhang of rock and retrieved his bedroll from Copper's saddle, making her as comfortable as possible. "I am Zachary Ramsey," he said as he examined her ankle. "Most folks call me Zach." "Beatrice Newfield," she replied through gritted teeth as he gently probed the swelling. "B. Well, Miss Newfield, I think your ankle might be broken. I need to get you to town where a doctor can look at it properly. Can you ride?" "I will manage whatever I must," she said with a determination that impressed him. Despite her obvious pain and exhaustion, there was steel in her spine. He retrieved what he could from her scattered belongings. Most of her supplies were ruined or lost, but he found a small leather trunk that had survived relatively intact. Inside were a few changes of clothing, all well worn and carefully mended, a Bible, and a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. Also a small painted portrait of a young couple, probably her parents. "Is there anything else you need from the wagon?" he asked. Beatrice shook her head. "That is everything I own in the world." The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, struck Zachary harder than it should have. Here was someone who had even less than he did, at least in material terms, yet she had not given up. She had set out alone into dangerous territory, seeking a better life with nothing but courage and determination to sustain her. He fashioned a splint for her ankle using branches and strips torn from his spare shirt, then lifted her onto Copper. She bit back a cry of pain as he settled her in the saddle, and he swung up behind her, holding her steady with one arm while guiding the horse with the other. "I am sorry about your horse and wagon," Zachary said as they started back toward the trail. "I will come back for them later, see if anything can be salvaged." "The horse is not mine to leave," Beatrice said worriedly. "I bought her from a widow in Tucson who needed the money. I promised I would take good care of her. Then we will get her too." He dismounted and went back for the mare, a gentle-looking sorrel with kind eyes. She came willingly enough once he freed her from the broken wagon traces, and he tied her lead rope to his saddle. They made slow progress back to the trail, and Zachary changed his plans. Wilcox was too far for Beatrice in her condition. His cabin was closer, and he had basic medical supplies there. "I am taking you to my place first," he told her. "It is not fancy, but it is clean and safe. I can tend your injuries properly there, let you rest, then take you into town tomorrow." He felt her stiffen slightly in his arms. "Mr. Ramsey, I do not think that would be proper." "Probably not," he admitted, but proper won't help if you take a fever or that ankle swells worse. I give you my word as a gentleman that you will be safe with me. You can have my bed and I will sleep outside. Once you are stronger, we will go to town and find you that position you were seeking." Beatrice was silent for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you. I do not seem to have much choice, and I believe I can trust you. You have kind eyes." No one had ever told Zachary he had kind eyes. The observation, so simple and direct, made something warm unfold in his chest. The sun was high overhead by the time they reached his cabin. Beatrice had dozed off against his shoulder, exhausted by pain and heat. He carried her inside and laid her on his bed, which suddenly seemed rough and inadequate. He had never cared before that his blankets were scratchy wool, that his pillow was just a flour sack stuffed with dried grass. Now, seeing this woman on them, he wished he had something softer, something finer to offer. He heated water over his small stove and cleaned her wounds with careful attention. The gash on her forehead was not as bad as it looked, and he applied a salve he had bought from an Apache medicine woman who sometimes traded in Wilcox. Beatrice woke during his ministrations but did not complain, even when he had to adjust her splint and the pain made her face go white. "You are good at this," she murmured when he finished. "I have patched myself up often enough. You learn to be your own doctor when you live alone. How long have you been alone?" The question should have felt intrusive, but something about the way she asked it, with genuine curiosity rather than pity, made it easy to answer. 3 years in this cabin. Before that, another year prospecting in other parts of Arizona. Before that, traveling west. I suppose I have been alone since my brother died in 1877. That was the last family I had. "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly. "I know what it is to be alone. My parents died of influenza 2 years ago in Kansas. I had no siblings, no other family. I stayed in our town for a while, but people talked. A young, unmarried woman living alone, it made them uncomfortable. I tried to find work, but no one wanted to hire me for anything respectable. The only offers I got were the kind that would have shamed my parents' memory." Zachary felt anger stir in his gut. He could imagine the kind of offers she meant. "So you came west. I heard there was more opportunity out here, that people cared less about convention and more about what a person could do. I can read and write and cipher. I can teach children or keep a house. I can cook and sew and garden. I thought surely someone in Arizona would need those skills." "I am certain they will," Zachary assured her. "Wilcox is growing. There are families there who would be grateful for a teacher." He made her a meal of beans and salt pork, apologizing for its simplicity. Beatrice ate like she had not seen food in a week, which was probably close to the truth. As she ate, he found himself watching her, noticing small things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when it fell forward. The precise, economical way she moved despite her pain. The quick intelligence in her eyes as she looked around his cabin, taking in the neat organization, the books stacked carefully on a makeshift shelf. "You read," she observed, nodding toward the books. "When I can. I taught myself mostly. My mother knew her letters and taught me when I was young, but formal schooling was not something we could afford." "What do you read?" "Whatever I can get my hands on. Shakespeare when I want poetry. Dickens when I want a good story. The newspaper when I want to know what the world is doing. Books on geology and mining when I want to improve my prospects." Beatrice's eyes lit up. "You are a prospector. I should have guessed from your hands and the tools outside. Have you had any luck?" Zachary hesitated. He had told no one about his find, and caution warred with an unexpected desire to share the news with someone who might actually care. "I struck gold yesterday morning. A significant vein." Her reaction was everything he had imagined when he first made the discovery. Her face transformed with joy, her eyes going wide with delight. "Oh, that is wonderful. After 3 years of work, you finally succeeded. You must be so happy." "I am," he said, though even to his own ears it sounded hollow. "It is everything I worked for." Beatrice tilted her head, studying him with those sage green eyes. But what is gold worth if you have no one to share it with?" The words hung in the air between them, more honest than he had intended. Beatrice reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the table, her fingers light and warm against his calloused skin. "Gold is worth whatever value we assign it," she said quietly. "And I think perhaps there are things more valuable that we often overlook until we lose them. Things like human connection, kindness, someone who cares if we live or die." "You understand," Zachary said, surprised by the relief he felt. "I do. I have been alone too. It is a different kind of poverty, is it not? One that all the gold in the world cannot remedy." They talked as the afternoon wore into evening, the conversation flowing with an ease that Zachary had never experienced before. Beatrice told him about growing up in Kansas, about her parents who had been school teachers and had instilled in her a love of learning. She spoke of the small joys of her childhood, the heartbreak of losing her parents, the loneliness of the months that followed. She described her journey west with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, the vastness of the landscape, both frightening and freeing. Zachary found himself sharing stories he had never told anyone. About his brother, who had been his best friend. About the dreams they had shared of making their fortune in the West. About the guilt he still carried that he had survived when his brother had not. About the long nights of wondering what the point of it all was if there was no one to build a life with. As darkness fell, he lit the lamps and insisted Beatrice rest. She was clearly exhausted, her eyes drooping despite her efforts to stay awake. He stepped outside to give her privacy to change into a nightgown from her trunk, then returned to bank the fire and check her splint one more time. "Mr. Ramsey," she said sleepily as he turned to leave. "Zach, please. Zach, thank you for saving my life. I know I would have died out there if you had not come along. I am glad I did. Get some rest now." He took his bedroll and settled outside under the stars, something he had done countless times before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, his cabin held another person, another heartbeat, another soul. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for 3 years felt lighter somehow, as if sharing it had diminished its power. The next morning, Zachary woke to the smell of coffee brewing. He stood up quickly, confused, and found Beatrice hobbling around outside his cabin, using a branch as a makeshift crutch. She had managed to start a fire and was heating the coffee pot. "You should be resting," he said, rushing to her side. "I have rested. Now I want to be useful. You saved my life and opened your home to me. The least I can do is make breakfast." She had also, he noticed, managed to tidy up the area around his cabin, stacking the wood more neatly, organizing the tools he had left scattered about. Her trunk sat open nearby and she had changed into a different dress, still worn but clean and carefully pressed. "You did not have to do this," Zachary protested, but she waved him off. "I know I did not have to. I wanted to. It feels good to do something normal, something domestic. I have spent so long just surviving that I forgot what it was like to simply live." They ate breakfast together, and Zachary marveled at how comfortable it felt, how right. As if having someone to share his morning coffee with was what had been missing all along, the piece that made everything else make sense. "Your ankle looks better," he observed. "The swelling has gone down some. Your salve helped, and the splint. You really do have a gift for healing. I would still like to get you to a proper doctor. We can leave this afternoon if you feel up to it. The ride should not be too difficult if we take it slow. Beatrice nodded, but he saw reluctance in her eyes. Of course. You have already done so much. I should not impose on you any longer. You are not imposing, Zachary said quickly. I just want to make sure your ankle heals properly, and I imagine you are eager to get to Wilcox and find that teaching position. Yes, she said, but the word lacked conviction. They spent the morning preparing for the journey, Zachary packing supplies while Beatrice insisted on helping despite her injury. As the sun climbed higher, he found himself moving slower, finding excuses to delay their departure. He told himself it was concern for her health, but deeper down, he knew the truth. He did not want her to leave. In less than a day, Beatrice Newfield had filled his cabin and his life with a warmth he had not known he was missing. Finally, there were no more preparations to make. Zachary saddled Copper and helped Beatrice mount. As he had the day before, he swung up behind her, holding her steady. But this time, she leaned back against him with a trust that made his heart ache. Her hair smelled like the lavender soap he had offered her that morning, and he could feel the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. The ride to Wilcox took 2 hours, and Zachary found himself wishing it would last forever. They talked about everything and nothing, comfortable silences punctuating easy conversation. Beatrice pointed out wildflowers she recognized, and he told her the names of the mountains and canyons they passed. It felt like they had known each other for years rather than a single day. Wilcox was a small but growing town, its main street lined with wooden buildings that still smelled of fresh-cut lumber. There was a general store, a saloon, a church, a school, a telegraph office, and various other establishments that served the ranchers, miners, and farmers in the area. People moved along the boardwalks with purpose, going about their business in the afternoon heat. Zachary took Beatrice first to the doctor's office, a small building attached to the doctor's home. Dr. Samuel Garrett was a gruff but competent man in his 50s who had seen his share of frontier injuries. He examined Beatrice's ankle with professional efficiency while Zachary waited outside, then called him back in. Not broken, thankfully, Dr. Garrett announced. Badly sprained. You did a good job with the splint, Ramsey. Keep her off it for another week or so and it should heal up fine. I will wrap it properly and she can use crutches instead of that branch. A week, Beatrice said, dismayed. But I need to find work. I cannot afford to rest for a week. Doctor. Garrett gave her a stern look. You will rest if you want that ankle to heal properly. Otherwise, you will limp for the rest of your life. Where are you staying? Beatrice's face fell. I had hoped to find a position right away, something that included room and board. I do not have money for a hotel. Zachary spoke before he could think better of it. She can stay with me. My cabin is not far and she will have proper supervision. It is all completely respectable. Dr. Garrett raised an eyebrow. That's so. You two married? No, Zachary said quickly. But I cannot in good conscience leave her without a place to stay. She will have her own room, complete privacy. It is very kind of you, Mr. Ramsey, Beatrice interjected, but I cannot continue to impose. You are not imposing, Zachary insisted. Please, let me help you. Once your ankle heals, I will bring you back to town and help you find a proper position. I know people here. I can make inquiries. Dr. Garrett watched this exchange with interest, then shrugged. Not my business how you two arrange things. Miss Newfield, I want to see you again in 1 week. If you are staying with Ramsey, make sure he brings you back for me to check that ankle. After paying the doctor, Zachary helped Beatrice back onto Copper, but instead of heading straight back to the cabin, he stopped at the general store. What are we doing? Beatrice asked. Getting you a few things you might need, and some supplies for the cabin. If you are staying for a week, I want to make sure you are comfortable. "Zach, you have already done so much. You do not need to spend your money on me." I struck gold. "Remember, I can afford it. Besides, I want to." Inside the store, Zachary selected items with care. Fresh food, coffee, sugar, flour. A new blanket, soft and thick. A pillow stuffed with real feathers. Some fabric that matched the color of Beatrice's eyes, thinking perhaps she could make a new dress. Soap ribbon, a hand mirror. Small luxuries he had never bothered with for himself, but suddenly seemed essential. The storekeeper, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Henderson, watched with barely concealed curiosity. "Having a guest, Zach. Miss Newfield will be staying at my cabin while her ankle heals." "Completely proper," he added quickly, aware of how it sounded. Mrs. Henderson's eyes flickered to Beatrice, who waited outside on the horse, then back to Zachary. "Of course. Give my regards to Miss Newfield. Tell her if she needs anything at all, she is welcome to come to me." The implication was clear. Mrs. Henderson was offering Beatrice a safe harbor if she needed it, a place to run if Zachary proved to be less than honorable. He appreciated the woman's concern even as it stung a bit. "I will tell her, thank you." He loaded the supplies onto the pack horse he had brought along for this purpose. Then they headed back toward the cabin. The sun was starting its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. "You did not have to buy all those things," Beatrice said quietly. "I know, but I wanted you to have them. You deserve nice things, Beatrice. You deserve comfort and security and all the small pleasures that make life worth living. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me." Zachary was silent for a moment, searching for the right words. "Maybe because I know what it is to need help and have no one to offer it. Maybe because you remind me that there is still goodness in the world. Or maybe because in one day you have made me feel less alone than I have in 3 years. Is that enough of a reason?" He felt her hand find his where it rested on her waist, her fingers intertwining with his. "That is more than enough." The week that followed was the happiest Zachary had known in years. He set up a proper bedroom for Beatrice, hanging a curtain for privacy and making sure she had everything she needed. True to his word, he slept outside under the stars, though the nights were growing warmer and it was no hardship. During the days, while Beatrice rested her ankle, they fell into an easy routine. Zachary would work at his mine in the mornings, extracting gold with methodical care. He had filed his claim in town, and word was already spreading about his strike. Several people had approached him about selling, but he had politely declined. The gold was not going anywhere, and he was in no hurry. In the afternoons, he would return to the cabin to find Beatrice had prepared lunch with the supplies he brought. She could make a feast out of the simplest ingredients, and she seemed to take genuine pleasure in cooking for someone other than herself. They would eat together, talking about anything and everything. She told him about the books she loved, and he promised to get her more from town. She taught him things she had learned from her parents, little bits of history and science that fascinated him. In the evenings, they would sit outside as the desert cooled, watching the stars emerge one by one. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence. Zachary found himself memorizing everything about her. The way she laughed, a full-bodied sound that held nothing back. The thoughtful expression she got when considering a difficult question. The gentleness of her hands when she tended the small garden she had started near the cabin, unable to remain completely idle despite her injury. He was falling in love with her. The realization should have terrified him, but instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Like recognizing something that had always been true, but had just been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The question was whether she felt the same. Beatrice was harder to read. She was warm and friendly, clearly enjoying his company. But was it just gratitude? Was she simply making the best of a difficult situation? Zachary had no experience with women, no frame of reference for interpreting the looks she gave him, the casual touches that seemed to linger a bit longer than strictly necessary. On the fifth day, as they sat together preparing vegetables for supper, Beatrice suddenly spoke. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Why have you never married? A good man like you, hard-working and kind and intelligent. Surely there were women who would have been interested." Zachary peeled a potato slowly, considering his answer. "I suppose I never felt like I had anything to offer. When I was young, we were too poor. Then my brother died, and I was focused on just surviving the journey west. Once I got here, I was so consumed with finding gold that I did not think about much else. And the few women I met in mining camps or small towns, they wanted stability and security. I could not offer them that when I was barely scraping by myself. And now that you have found your gold, now I realize that what I want is not someone who wants me for my gold. I want someone who would have valued me even when I had nothing. Someone who sees the man rather than the money." Beatrice set down her knife and looked at him directly. "And if such a woman existed, what would you do?" Zachary's heart hammered in his chest. "I would count myself the luckiest man alive. I would do everything in my power to make her happy, to give her the life she deserves. I would thank God every day for bringing her into my life. Even if she came to you with nothing. Not even a whole wagon to her name, especially then, because it would mean she was with me for the right reasons." Beatrice's eyes shimmered with tears. "Zach, I need to tell you something. This week with you has been the happiest I have been since my parents died. Maybe even happier than that, because this feels like something all my own, not borrowed from childhood. I wake up each morning eager to see you, to talk with you, to simply be near you. I know it is too soon, and I know I should not feel this way, but I cannot help it." Zachary reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "You should not feel which way, like I am falling in love with you," she whispered. The words hung in the desert air, precious and fragile. Zachary lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then we are both falling, because I feel exactly the same. I have from almost the moment I found you." Beatrice's tears spilled over, but she was smiling. "This is crazy. We barely know each other. I know you have a kind heart and a brave spirit. I know you can find joy in simple things and that you do not complain even when you have every right to. I know you make me want to be a better man. What else do I need to know? That I snore sometimes, that I am terrible at singing, that I have a temper when I am truly angry, though it takes a lot to get me there, that I want children someday, at least 3 or 4, that I believe in building a life based on partnership and mutual respect, not just romantic feelings. I want all of that too," Zachary said fervently. "The children, the partnership, the life together, even the snoring I can live with." Beatrice laughed through her tears. "You are supposed to say I do not snore. I would not know yet, but I am hoping I will find out." He stood and pulled her up with him, mindful of her ankle. She leaned against him, her arms coming around his waist, her head resting on his chest. Zachary held her close, breathing in the scent of lavender and sunshine and everything good he had been missing in his life. "Marry me," he said into her hair. "I know it is fast, I know people will talk. But I do not care. Life is too short and too hard to waste time when you find something real. Marry me, Beatrice. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, her green-gray eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she smiled, radiant and sure. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." Zachary kissed her then, a soft, sweet kiss that tasted like tears and joy and promise. It was his first real kiss, and he poured into it all the loneliness he had felt, all the hope she had rekindled, all the love that had bloomed so fast and so fierce in his heart. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Beatrice laughed shakily. "Well, that was worth waiting for." "We can wait for the rest," Zachary assured her. "I want to do this properly. Court you, marry you in a church with witnesses, give you the wedding you deserve. I do not need anything fancy, just you and a preacher and a promise that means something. You will have that and more, I promise." The next day, Zachary took Beatrice back to Wilcox. Dr. Garrett pronounced her ankle nearly healed, good enough for gentle walking with a cane for support. Then they went to the church and spoke with Reverend Thomas, a kindly older man who had presided over the small congregation for 5 years. "You want to get married?" Reverend Thomas repeated, looking between them with surprise. "I did not even know you were courting." "It has been quick," Zachary admitted, "but we are both certain, very certain." The Reverend looked at Beatrice. "Miss Newfield, are you being pressured into this?" "If you need help or a place to stay, the church can provide that." "I appreciate your concern, Reverend, but I am not being pressured. Zach has been nothing but respectful and kind. I am marrying him because I love him and because I believe we can build a good life together." Reverend Thomas studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Love is a gift from God, and I will not stand in its way. When would you like the ceremony?" "As soon as possible," Zachary said. "This Sunday, if that works." "This Sunday it is." "I will publish the banns and make the arrangements. You will need witnesses." "We will find some," Beatrice assured him as they left the church. Beatrice squeezed Zachary's hand. "We are really doing this?" "Having second thoughts, not even for a moment." "Are you?" "Never." They spent the rest of the day in town, making preparations. Zachary ordered a simple gold wedding band from the blacksmith, who promised to have it ready by Sunday. Beatrice purchased fabric to make a new dress, refusing Zachary's offers to buy her something fancier from the general store's limited selection. "I want to make it myself," she insisted. "It will mean more that way." Mrs. Henderson, when she heard the news, was surprisingly supportive. "I had a feeling about you too," she said with a knowing smile. "You have a good man there, Miss Newfield. Zach Ramsey is one of the most honest, hard-working people in this territory. You treat him well." "I intend to," Beatrice promised. Word spread quickly in a small town, and by the time they left to return to the cabin, several people had congratulated them. Some looked skeptical about the speed of the courtship, but most seemed genuinely happy. Zachary had been a fixture in Wilcox for 3 years, always polite and honest in his dealings. People respected him. The days leading up to Sunday passed in a blur of activity and anticipation. Beatrice worked on her dress, her fingers flying over the fabric with practiced skill. Zachary continued working his claim but found his mind wandering constantly to the woman waiting at his cabin, to the future they would build together. He had been living for so long in survival mode, focused only on the next day, the next strike, the next small success. Now, suddenly, he could envision years stretching ahead. Children playing in the yard, growing old with someone by his side, building something that mattered beyond just wealth. On Saturday evening, Beatrice tried on her finished dress. It was simple but elegant, made from cream-colored fabric with delicate lace trim she had added from her mother's collection. She had altered one of her mother's old dresses to create it, she explained, wanting to have her parents present in some way on her wedding day. "You look beautiful," Zachary said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are supposed to wait until tomorrow to see it," Beatrice teased, but her eyes were bright with pleasure at the compliment. "I could not wait, and I am glad I did not. You take my breath away." That night, Zachary lay under the stars, unable to sleep. Tomorrow he would marry Beatrice Newfield. Tomorrow his life would change forever. The gold strike that had seemed so important just weeks ago now felt like a secondary blessing, a means to provide for the family he hoped they would build rather than an end in itself. He thought about his brother, wished desperately that he could be here to see this. His brother would have liked Beatrice, would have approved of Zachary's choice. The thought brought both sadness and comfort. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the Arizona sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Zachary dressed in his best clothes, which were not much but were clean and carefully pressed. He hitched up Copper and the wagon he had repaired from Beatrice's accident, wanting to bring her to town in comfort and style. Beatrice emerged from the cabin in her cream dress, her hair carefully arranged and pinned with small wildflowers she had gathered. She carried a simple bouquet of the same desert blooms. She looked like something out of a dream, beautiful and real and his. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand to help her into the wagon. "More than ready. Let us go get married." The church was fuller than Zachary had expected. Mrs. Henderson was there with her husband, Dr. Garrett and his wife, several of the townspeople he had dealt with over the years. Even some of the ranchers from the surrounding area had come, drawn by curiosity or genuine goodwill. Reverend Thomas stood at the front, his Bible open, a warm smile on his weathered face. Zachary walked Beatrice down the short aisle and they stood together before the altar, hands clasped. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Reverend Thomas spoke of love as a choice, a commitment renewed each day through action and sacrifice. He spoke of partnership, of two people becoming stronger together than they ever could be apart. He spoke of faith, not just in God but in each other. When it came time for the vows, Zachary's voice was steady and sure. "I, Zachary Ramsey, take you, Beatrice Newfield, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you all the days of my life. In prosperity and hardship, in joy and sorrow, I will stand by your side. You have given me a reason to hope again, and I will spend my life trying to be worthy of that gift." Beatrice's eyes shimmered with tears, but her voice was equally firm. "I, Beatrice Newfield, take you, Zachary Ramsey, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, support you, and build a life with you that honors both our dreams. You saved me, not just from the desert but from loneliness. I will treasure that gift every day of my life." Zachary slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, and Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride." Zachary cupped Beatrice's face gently in his hands and kissed her, soft and reverent, aware of the witnesses but caring only about the woman in his arms. She kissed him back with equal tenderness, and when they pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. The congregation applauded and people came forward to offer congratulations. Mrs. Henderson hugged Beatrice and whispered something that made her laugh. "Dr. Garrett shook Zachary's hand firmly and told him he had chosen well. Even some of the crusty old ranchers offered gruff words of approval. The community had prepared a small celebration at the church hall, simple but heartfelt. There was food, music from a fiddle player, even a cake that Mrs. Henderson had baked. Zachary and Beatrice danced their first dance as husband and wife to a sweet, slow tune, moving together as if they had been doing it for years. "Happy," Zachary murmured as they swayed. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same question every time I look at you." As the afternoon wore into evening, they finally took their leave, climbing into the wagon amid well wishes and the occasional ribald joke about wedding nights. Zachary just grinned and guided Copper toward home. Beatrice nestled against his side. The cabin looked different somehow when they arrived, more welcoming. Zachary helped Beatrice down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "What are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold. It is tradition. We do not have a threshold, we have a dirt floor and a piece of canvas for a door. We have a home, that is what matters." He carried her inside and set her down gently. The interior was dim, lit only by the last rays of sunlight coming through the window. Beatrice turned to face him, suddenly looking nervous. "I should tell you," she began. That is, I do not exactly know what to expect from tonight." Zachary took her hands in his. "Neither do I, to be honest, but we will figure it out together, and there is no rush, we have the rest of our lives. I want to be a good wife to you. You already are, just by being here, by choosing me. Everything else we will learn as we go." He kissed her then, slowly and deeply, pouring all his love and desire and tenderness into it. She responded with growing confidence, her arms winding around his neck, her body pressing close to his. They took their time, discovering each other with gentle hands and whispered words, learning the geography of love with patience and care. Later, lying together in the darkness with Beatrice curled against his side, Zachary felt a peace he had never known. This was what had been missing. Not the gold, not the success or recognition. This simple human connection, the intimacy of shared space and shared lives. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "I love you too," she murmured back, already half asleep. "My husband." The word sent a thrill through him. Husband. He was someone's husband. He belonged to someone, and someone belonged to him. After years of isolation, he was finally, blessedly, not alone. The weeks that followed were an adjustment as they learned to truly live together, to navigate the small frictions and negotiations of married life. Beatrice had her own ideas about how things should be organized, and Zachary had his habits from years of living alone. But they approached every disagreement with patience and humor, always remembering that they were on the same side. Beatrice transformed the cabin with small touches. Curtains made from extra fabric, a tablecloth for their rough table, wildflowers in a jar, a small garden that she tended carefully, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn desert soil. She made the cabin feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. Zachary, meanwhile, began the serious work of developing his mine. He hired a few workers from town, men he trusted, and established proper operations. The gold kept coming, more than he had even hoped. He opened an account at the bank in Wilcox, watched the numbers grow with satisfaction, but always came home to Beatrice before dark. In August, Beatrice missed her monthly courses. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Zachary's hopes up in case she was mistaken. But by September there was no doubt. She was pregnant, she told him one evening after supper, simply and directly. "Zach, I am going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby." Zachary stared at her for a moment, processing the words. Then a grin spread across his face, wide and joyful. He picked her up and spun her around carefully, laughing with pure delight. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "I hope you are happy about it," Beatrice said, laughing at his reaction. "Happy? I am overjoyed. This is the best news I have ever received." "Well, second best after you agreeing to marry me." He set her down and knelt before her, placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I already love you more than I can say. Your mother and I are going to take such good care of you." Beatrice ran her fingers through his hair, touched by the tenderness in his voice. "We are going to need a bigger house. Then we will build one. Whatever you want, whatever you need. I want you and our baby to have everything." True to his word, Zachary began planning a proper house that fall. Not a mansion, but a solid, comfortable home with multiple bedrooms, a real kitchen, glass windows, and a wooden floor. He hired a builder from Tucson and worked alongside the man whenever he was not at the mine, wanting to have a hand in creating his family's home. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, Zachary became increasingly protective and attentive. He insisted she rest more, worried constantly about her health, and drove Dr. Garrett to distraction with his anxious questions. Beatrice bore his concern with patient amusement, assuring him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and she would be fine. The new house was finished in March of 1882, just a month before the baby was due. It was beautiful, far nicer than anything Zachary had ever lived in. The main room was spacious and bright, with a real fireplace and comfortable furniture shipped from Tucson. The kitchen had a proper stove and cabinets. There were 3 bedrooms, 1 for them and 2 for children. A porch wrapped around the front, perfect for sitting in the evening. Beatrice cried when she saw it complete. "It is perfect, more than I ever dreamed of. You deserve it. You deserve so much more than I could ever give you. You have given me everything that matters. A home, a family, love. What more could I want?" Their son was born on a warm April evening, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Dr. Garrett assisted with the birth, and Zachary paced outside like a caged animal until he heard that cry. Then he rushed in to find Beatrice, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. "Meet your son," she said softly. Zachary approached slowly, almost afraid to touch something so small and precious. The baby had a cap of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn the same brown as his father's. His little fists waved in the air and he made small mewling sounds. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. They had discussed names but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Zachary knew. Samuel, after Dr. Garrett, who helped bring him safely into the world. Samuel Ramsey. "Samuel," Beatrice repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Samuel Zachary Ramsey." "Samuel Zachary Ramsey," Zachary agreed. He reached out and let his son grip his finger, marveling at the tiny hand, the perfect miniature nails. "Hello, Samuel. I am your papa. I promise to do my best by you, to teach you right from wrong, to love you always. You and your mama, you are my whole world now." Beatrice smiled up at him, her eyes full of love. "We are a family." "Yes, we are." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and hungry, with a temperament that swung between placid contentment and determined fussing when his needs were not immediately met. Zachary discovered depths of patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor with a crying infant at 3 in the morning, changing diapers with fumbling but willing hands, marveling at every small milestone. Beatrice bloomed into motherhood, her love for Samuel fierce and tender. She nursed him, sang to him, played with him endlessly. But she also made sure to save time and energy for Zachary, understanding that their marriage was the foundation everything else was built on. They would sit together in the evenings after Samuel was asleep, talking about their day, making plans for the future, simply enjoying each other's company. The mine continued to produce, making Zachary one of the wealthier men in the territory, but he was not flashy about it. He and Beatrice lived well but not extravagantly, finding joy in simple pleasures. Good food, comfortable clothes, books to read, time with their son. They gave generously to the church and helped neighbors in need, remembering what it was like to have nothing. In the summer of 1883, Beatrice told Zachary she was pregnant again. He reacted with the same joy as before, already imagining a brother or sister for Samuel. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because Beatrice knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in February of 1884, a tiny thing with wisps of blonde hair and eyes the color of sage after rain. "She looks like you," Zachary said in wonder, holding his daughter for the first time. "She has your chin," Beatrice countered. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking Rose, after the wild roses that bloom by the creek in spring. Rose-Marie Ramsey." "Rose-Marie," Beatrice said softly. "It is beautiful. Welcome, Rose-Marie. Your brother is going to love you." Samuel, at nearly 2 years old, was curious about the new baby but not quite sure what to make of her. He would pat her head gently when allowed but preferred to stay close to his mama. Zachary worked hard to make sure Samuel did not feel displaced, spending one-on-one time with his son while Beatrice rested and cared for Rose. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, hitting milestones that filled their parents with pride. Samuel took his first steps, then started running everywhere. Rose smiled, then laughed, then babbled constantly. The house rang with the sounds of childhood, and Zachary would sometimes stop in the middle of his day, overcome with gratitude for everything he had. In 1885, Beatrice approached Zachary with an idea. "I want to start a school. Nothing fancy, just a small schoolhouse where I can teach the children in the area. There are enough families now to make it worthwhile, and most cannot afford to send their children away to boarding school." "That is a wonderful idea," Zachary agreed immediately. "Where would you want to build it?" "There is that flat area about a mile from here, near the road to town. It would be accessible for most families. If you could help build the schoolhouse, I could start teaching by fall." Zachary not only helped build the schoolhouse but funded it entirely, providing books, slates, desks, and supplies. Word spread quickly, and by the time the school opened in September, Beatrice had 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. She taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and science, bringing to the frontier children the same quality of education she had received from her parents. The school became a source of pride for the community. Parents who had never learned to read and write themselves watched their children develop skills that would open up opportunities. Beatrice was patient and kind but firm, expecting her students to work hard and behave respectfully. They loved her for it. Zachary would sometimes visit the school at lunchtime, bringing Beatrice a meal she had not had time to prepare for herself. He would watch her teach, marveling at her skill and passion. She was in her element, sharing knowledge and inspiring young minds. It made him love her even more. In 1886, their third child arrived, another son they named Thomas after Reverend Thomas, who had married them and remained a good friend. Thomas was a quiet baby, content to observe the world with solemn eyes. Samuel, now 4, took his role as big brother seriously, helping his mama with both Rose and the new baby. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The mine played out eventually, as all mines do, but Zachary had been wise with his money. He invested in land, in cattle, in the growing town of Wilcox. He and Beatrice were comfortable, able to provide for their children and still have plenty left over. In 1888, they added a fourth child to their family, a daughter named Grace who arrived with a shock of red hair no one could quite explain. "My grandmother had red hair," Beatrice recalled. "I had forgotten until just now." 4 children kept them busy, the house always full of noise and activity. But Zachary and Beatrice made sure to carve out time for each other, understanding that their relationship was the center that held everything else together. They would take evening walks after the children were in bed, hand in hand, talking or simply enjoying the desert night. "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked one evening in 1890 as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "If you had not found me that day, you could have had a quieter life. fewer responsibilities. Zachary pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I regret nothing. Before I found you, I had gold but no purpose for it. I had success but no one to share it with. You gave my life meaning, Beatrice. You and our children, you are the real treasure. Everything else is just details. I love you, she said, leaning into his embrace. I have loved you from almost the first day, and I love you more with each year that passes. And I love you. You are worth more than all the gold I ever found. You still are. They stood together as the stars began to emerge, two people who had been alone finding completeness in each other. Behind them, their house glowed with lamplight, and inside, their children played and laughed. It was a life neither of them could have imagined in those dark days before they found each other, but it was real and it was theirs. As the years rolled on, Zachary and Beatrice watched their children grow into capable, kind young people. Samuel showed an interest in engineering and mathematics, spending hours with his father learning about mining and construction. Rose inherited her mother's love of teaching and would often help at the school. Thomas was quieter but had a gift with animals, especially horses. Grace, the youngest, was creative and artistic, always drawing or making something with her hands. The school continued to thrive, expanding to accommodate more students. Beatrice hired another teacher to help, a young woman from the East who had come west seeking adventure and purpose. The community rallied around the school, understanding the value of education in building a better future. Zachary stayed involved in the business life of Wilcox, serving on the town council and helping make decisions that would shape its growth. He never forgot what it was like to struggle, and he made sure the town's development included provisions for those less fortunate. A small hospital, a library, better roads, a proper water system, all received his support and funding. In 1895, when Samuel turned 13, Zachary took him on a trip to the old mine. It had been years since he had extracted any gold, but he wanted to show his son where their fortune had come from. "This is where I was when I struck gold," Zachary said, standing at the entrance to the shaft. "Right here, I found the vein that changed my life." "You must have been so excited," Samuel said, examining the rock walls with interest. "I was at first. But then I realized I had no one to share it with, and the gold seemed less important. That is when I understood that wealth without connection is just metal in the ground. It has no real value." "Then you found Mama." "Then I found your Mama, or she found me, depending on how you look at it. Either way, that was the day my real fortune began." Samuel looked at his father thoughtfully. "Do you think I will find someone like that someday? Someone who makes everything else make sense?" "I hope you do, son. I hope you all do. There is no greater treasure than finding someone who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. Someone you can build a life with who makes you better than you would be alone. Like you and Mama. Like me and your Mama." They stood together in the desert sunshine, father and son, bound by blood and love, and the understanding that some lessons cannot be taught, only lived and shared. By 1898, the children were growing into young adults. Samuel was 16 and talking about studying engineering at a university in California. Rose was 14 and already helping her mother run the school with remarkable skill. Thomas was 12 and spent every spare moment working with the horses on their expanding ranch. Grace was 10 and had covered every surface of the house with her artwork. Beatrice had turned 40, and Zachary was 49. They had been married for 17 years, and the love between them had only deepened with time. They knew each other completely, all the quirks and flaws and wonderful qualities. They had weathered illnesses, financial worries, the normal challenges of raising children. Through it all, they had remained partners, lovers, best friends. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before, Beatrice leaned her head on Zachary's shoulder. "We built a good life, did we not? We built a wonderful life. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still." "What do you want to do with those years?" Zachary thought about it. "I want to watch our children grow and thrive. I want to meet our grandchildren someday. I want to keep making Wilcox a better place. But mostly, I want to spend every day with you. That has always been enough for me." "And for me," Beatrice said softly. "I think about that girl who set out alone in a wagon, so scared but trying to be brave. I wish I could tell her that everything would work out better than she ever dreamed, that she would find not just work and shelter, but love and family and purpose. I think about the man I was, standing in that mine with gold in his hands and emptiness in his heart. I wish I could tell him that the real treasure was just days away from finding him, that he needed to hold on just a little bit longer." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars emerged. Inside the house, they could hear the children talking and laughing, the sounds of a family at ease with each other. It was a symphony of belonging, of home, of love made manifest in daily life. The turn of the century brought changes to Arizona and to Wilcox. The town was growing rapidly, transforming from a frontier settlement into a proper community with modern conveniences. Telephones appeared, then automobiles, though Zachary preferred his horses. The wild, lawless days of the Old West were fading into memory, replaced by civilization and order. Through it all, Zachary and Beatrice remained constants in their community. They were respected, even beloved, known for their generosity and kindness. Young couples would sometimes come to them for advice, drawn by the obvious strength of their marriage and the happiness of their family. "What is the secret?" one young bride asked Beatrice at a church social. "How do you stay so in love after all these years?" Beatrice smiled, glancing over at Zachary, who was talking with a group of ranchers. "There is no secret, really. We choose each other every day. We remember that we are on the same team, working toward the same goals. We talk, we listen, we forgive. We make time for each other even when life gets busy, and we never forget how lucky we are to have found each other in the first place." It sounds simple. The concept is simple. The execution takes work, but it is work worth doing. In 1902, Samuel left for university, the first of their children to leave home. It was hard for both Zachary and Beatrice, watching their eldest son board the train for California. But they were proud, too, of the fine young man he had become. He promised to write every week and to come home for holidays. Rose took over more responsibilities at the school, essentially running it alongside her mother. She had a gift for teaching that rivaled Beatrice's own, and students responded to her warmth and enthusiasm. At 18, she was already receiving attention from several young men in town, but she was focused on her work and in no hurry to marry. Thomas, at 16, was managing much of their horse breeding operation. He had an instinctive understanding of the animals that served him well. The horses he trained were sought after throughout the territory, known for being calm, intelligent, and responsive. Grace, at 14, was the artist of the family. She had started taking commissions for portraits and landscapes, saving the money she earned with dreams of perhaps studying art someday in a big city. Zachary and Beatrice marveled at how different their children were from each other, yet how each one reflected values they had tried to instill. Honesty, hard work, kindness, courage. The children were their legacy, more valuable than any gold mine. In 1904, Rose met a young teacher who had come to Wilcox from New York. His name was David Fletcher, and he was idealistic, intelligent, and completely smitten with Rose from the moment he met her. Zachary liked him immediately, recognizing in the young man's eyes the same look he had once had when meeting Beatrice. Rose and David courted properly for a year, then married in the same church where Zachary and Beatrice had wed. Standing at the altar, watching his daughter take her vows, Zachary felt the passage of time like a physical presence. It seemed like just yesterday that Rose had been a baby in his arms, and now she was a woman starting her own family. "Our little girl," he whispered to Beatrice, who was crying quietly beside him. "I know, but look how happy she is. That is all we ever wanted for them." Samuel came home from university for the wedding, bringing news that he had met someone special himself. A classmate named Margaret, who shared his passion for building and creating. Zachary and Beatrice exchanged knowing looks. It seemed their children were following in their footsteps, finding partners who complemented and challenged them. In 1906, Rose and David welcomed their first child, making Zachary and Beatrice grandparents. The baby girl, named Beatrice after her grandmother, was perfect in every way. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Zachary felt a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to his eyes. "Look at her," he said to Beatrice. "Our granddaughter, part of you and me living on into the future. She is beautiful. They are all beautiful, this family we created." "That you created," Zachary corrected gently. "You are the heart of this family, Bea. Everything good in my life stems from finding you that day." "We found each other," Beatrice said firmly. "Neither of us was complete alone. Together we became something more." The years continued their steady march. Samuel married Margaret in 1907 and began a successful engineering firm in California, though he returned home often to visit. Thomas married a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth in 1909, and they took over full management of the horse operation. Grace, the free spirit, moved to San Francisco to study art in 1910, but came home every Christmas without fail. Zachary and Beatrice grew older gracefully, their hair turning silver, their faces gaining the lines that come from years of laughter and love. They slowed down somewhat but remained active in their community and devoted to each other. They took long walks in the cool mornings, sat on their porch in the evenings, traveled occasionally to visit their scattered children. In 1915, they celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren, 7 of them now, gathered for a party that lasted well into the night. There was food and music and laughter, stories told and retold, memories shared and created. At one point, Zachary found himself standing apart, watching his family with a sense of overwhelming gratitude. All of this beautiful, messy, wonderful life had sprung from one moment of compassion, from stopping to help a stranger in need, from taking a chance on love when it would have been easier to stay alone. Beatrice came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his as naturally as breathing. "What are you thinking about?" "About how different my life would have been if I had ridden past that day. If I had been too cautious or too scared to stop. But you did stop. You have always been the kind of man who stops to help, who chooses kindness over convenience. And you have always been the kind of woman worth stopping for." They kissed, soft and sweet, while around them their family celebrated. 66 years old and 57 years old respectively, they were still in love, still partners, still each other's greatest treasure. The world changed rapidly in the years that followed. World War I touched even their remote corner of Arizona, with young men from Wilcox going off to fight in foreign lands. Zachary and Beatrice did what they could to support the war effort and comfort the families left behind. They were too old to do much physically, but their wisdom and steady presence meant something to a community in turmoil. By 1920, Zachary was 71 and Beatrice 62. They had slowed considerably, Zachary's joints aching with arthritis, Beatrice's hearing not as sharp as it once was. But they were still together, still devoted, still finding joy in simple pleasures. They had 12 grandchildren now, and the first great-grandchildren were arriving. The family tree they had started with a simple wedding ceremony had branched and spread, creating a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. On a warm evening in June of 1921, 40 years after Zachary had first found gold in Beatrice, they sat on their porch as the sun set. Zachary held Beatrice's hand, his thumb tracing the familiar lines of her palm. They did not talk much anymore, but they did not need to. Everything important had already been said, lived, proven through decades of devotion. "Do you remember," Beatrice said softly, "that first night after I agreed to marry you? You said I was worth more than all the gold you had found. I remember. It was true then. It is true now. You were my gold, Zachary Ramsey, my treasure. These 40 years with you have been the richest imaginable. And you were mine, my fortune, my family, my everything." They sat in peaceful silence as the stars emerged one by one, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The lonely prospector had struck gold indeed, but not the kind that comes from the ground. The real gold was the woman who had found him when he needed her most, who had seen past his rough exterior to the good man within, who had chosen him every day for 40 years. And the woman who had set out alone in a broken wagon, seeking only survival, had found something far more valuable than employment or security. She had found a partner, a love that sustained through good times and bad, a family that grew from the seeds they planted together. As the night deepened and the desert cooled, Zachary and Beatrice made their way inside, leaning on each other as they had for so many years. Behind them, the stars wheeled overhead, constant and eternal. Before them, whatever days remained would be faced together, hand in hand, heart to heart. Their story was simple in its essence but profound in its impact. Two lonely people finding each other and building a life that mattered. Love discovered, nurtured, and sustained. A family created from nothing but hope and hard work and devotion. It was the oldest story in the world and the newest, timeless and immediate, ordinary and miraculous. And as they lay down to sleep that night, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been thousands of nights before, both knew with absolute certainty that they had been blessed beyond measure. Not because of gold or wealth or success, but because they had found the one thing that truly matters in this life. They had found each other, and that made all the difference.